Hey there, welcome to the Courage and Clarity podcast. I'm Steph Crowder, and in today's episode, we are going to be chatting about how to be successful even when you're working with teeny tiny amounts of time and in less than ideal circumstances. I'll be sharing 9 steps that are very relevant to today's coronavirus of 2020. Most of us are in quarantine, but even if you happen to be catching this episode in the future, you can still use these 9 steps whenever you want to get more done with less time, even if your circumstances are not the most ideal. Let's go to the show. Welcome to the Courage and Clarity podcast. I'm Steph Crowder, and these are real, honest stories from online business builders. These entrepreneurs have the gumption to go for it, and they're brave enough to share what it really takes to earn an independent living doing something you love. All right, so like I said, if you're catching this episode in real time, we are about 30 days or so into quarantine here in the United States, and things are weird. Things are scary. There are many people who are sick, even fighting for their lives, or bravely going to work each day to care for the sick and keep us safe. We've got grocery store workers who are going out every day, braving the world to keep our shelves stocked. And there are lots of people who are out of work, and our schools are closed. We're not commuting to work. We're not meeting up with friends. There's no virtual happy hours. In some places, it's probably not even safe to step outside your front door due to, the congested nature of living in a city. So yeah, weird times. And I don't know about you, but here in Kentucky, where I live, you can move. 3 weeks of lockdown were really hard to wrap my head around. My first thought was no school for 3 weeks. Is this a freaking joke? How am I going to do anything? I can remember the shock like it was yesterday, even though more than a month has actually passed since that first moment when school was canceled for the first time. And at first, it felt like a really bad snowstorm was coming. Most of us rushed to Target, maybe even raided the wine aisle. I don't know if that was just me. We were suspended in some weird holding pattern for those first few weeks, and most of us were thrown for a real loop when our precious routines were snatched away from us. Those first few days home in quarantine held a lot of high hopes for many of us. There were color-coded homeschool schedules and fantasizing about what we were going to do with all this free time. But pretty soon, the blind optimism gave way to a lot of stumbling around. Too many days in a row were thrown out the window as we each just tried to get through the day. And if you're juggling kids, it's often hour by hour. For those first few weeks, personally, I was in so much shock and felt so upside down in terms of how different my day-to-day life looked. I didn't really exercise. We ate whatever around here. I drank more wine than usual. I chucked the iPad at my kid, downloaded TikTok, even though I'm 32 years old, watched Tiger King, binged things on Netflix. You get the idea. We were in survival mode. But then we learned the jarring news that those 3 weeks would give way to more weeks, maybe even months. And now we're all settling into the sobering reality that this quarantine life is actually our new normal, at least for right now. I know this is an incredibly weird time for all of us, and I want to share something really important that my good friend and my coach, Jessica Ely, posted on Facebook because it applies to this episode as well. I want to be very clear about who I'm talking to here. Here's what Jessica had to say. Some people will not be okay right now. They are our most vulnerable, not necessarily in terms of health, but financially, emotionally, mentally, their access to resources, their physiological ability to not live in survival mode, etc. If that's you, stay alive and use whatever willpower you have to ask for help, and we will help. But for the rest of us, and this episode is really for the rest of us, this is life. And you can live right now too. You don't have to wait this out, biding your time until things go back to normal. Okay, so this episode is not for you if you are truly, truly needing to be in survival mode right now. That is the work right there. That is more than enough if that's where you're at. But there are many, many, many of us who don't need to be in survival mode right now. Yes, we're inconvenienced. Yes, this is hard. Yes, this is scary and weird, but we can still make progress. And here's what I want to say about progress. Sometime last week, it hit me that this is no longer a very temporary vacation when you can have a free for all and probably not notice a real difference in your life. Instead, it's an extended period of time when real progress or real damage will be made. I'm not trying to scare you or pose as the business Grim Reaper here, but I do want you to recognize that whether you actively choose progress or damage, you're choosing all the same. Even by making no choice, you're still making a choice. So we had our survival mode moment. Now we choose if we will continue to stay there, operating at neutral, or if we want to take the bull by the horns and work with what we've got to create a life that we're proud of right now. And so, my friends, that's kind of my intro for the 9 steps I want to share with you. If you're ready to settle in and say, well, this is not ideal, and I wasn't planning on having my kids home and homeschooling and having tiny, tiny little swatches of work time, that is, I'm with you. If you happen to be watching this video, I'm recording today's podcast as a video that's on YouTube. I'm in my bedroom right now, hiding from my family. And at first I was embarrassed by that. I was like, oh, I can't show this. But then I realized it illustrates my point perfectly. My family's downstairs right now. I'm working with an impossibly small amount of time before I will have to rush downstairs, get lunch, get naps going, and then dive into a workshop that I'm hosting. And yet, progress is still absolutely possible. And that's what I want to talk about with today's 9 steps. So let's get right into it. These steps are going to be, in keeping with courage and clarity, a great mix between mindset, courage, what you need to be thinking about in order to have your head in the right place to really make this work. We're going to balance that with clarity. So what are the steps? What are the tactics? What do you need to actually do and plan for in order to thrive when we literally don't even know what next month is going to be? We're going to talk about all of that and more. So let's get into those steps and tips. Number 1 is stop believing that more time equals more money. So I'm listing this one as number 1 for a reason. Believe me, when we were pitched into this quarantine life, this was the first real hurdle that I personally had to cross. And I'm still thinking about it pretty much every single day. And I've seen it from many of you in my community as well. Particularly if you have kids at home, you have likely just lost a lot of your work time. We depend on our kids being in school and daycare and with the nanny, and that's gone. And with that loss, you might be tempted to believe that your big dreams just went out the window right along with that time that you lost. So us humans, we like logic, we like linear logic, and concepts like more time, more money, that makes a lot of sense in our brains. But I'm here to tell you and tell myself that you can still hit your money goals and be of service with very little slivers of time. It's possible, and lots of people are doing it. Lots of people were doing it before this pandemic. And yes, it goes against everything we have been taught from a traditional standpoint about what hard work and wages look like. And that stuff runs really deep. So the first step is to open your mind to the possibility that you might be able to have everything you ever wanted with a heck of a lot less time. As Price Pritchett says, he's the author of U Squared. I know I reference this book often here on the podcast. He says, if you need to doubt something, doubt your own limits. We hold on so tightly to doubt. It's a very familiar feeling, and we doubt ourselves, doubt our idea, doubt our possibility, doubt our opportunity, doubt what can come true. And if doubt is a safety blanket for you, which I think it is for many of us, most of us, I would say, if you must doubt something, try doubting what you believe is the limit. See how that feels. Try that on. So that's the first one. The first one is to start to shed that belief, and it's a very active process. I recognize that. Start to shed the belief that more time equals more money. Play with that and see what happens. Number two is see the opportunity. So, what if we chose to see during this coronavirus pandemic? What if we chose to see that the entire world just paused so that we can take a second and hit the reset button and figure out what we want life to look like? I mean, seriously, how often have you said some version to yourself of, gosh, if I could just stop being go, go, go for just a second, or if I could stop rushing from school to activities to groceries and everything's so busy. Well, it's almost like be careful what you wish for, right? I know those words have passed my lips many times. And here we are with, if you choose to see it this way, a gift. Now, again, I want to reference the fact and point back to the fact that I know this situation, I'm almost hesitant to frame it that way because this is such a difficult time for so many people. But that doesn't mean that you can't cultivate gratitude for what you do have right in front of you. If you are stuck in your home, if your family is healthy, if you are in a place where you're mostly just inconvenienced, then I think there's a real opportunity to see this as a pause, as a stop, evaluate what the heck is going on in your life, and figure out what you want. There's this great quote going around right now that I have to share. It goes like this: in the rush to return to normal, use this time to consider which parts of normal are worth rushing back to. So before you rush to pick up all those pieces that you had on before, are you sure that you want to pick up every last puzzle piece that you had on before? Perhaps it's the wake-up call that showed itself more subtly to you before. It's the call we kept pushing to voicemail, if you get what I'm saying. Now the call is coming through louder, and the question is, are you going to pick it up? Are you going to answer that call? Are you going to go for the online business that you've had in the back of your head for years? Are you going to write that book that you've had on your heart? Are you going to answer that call? So that's the second step, is see the opportunity. Again, whether we're talking about coronavirus or not, if you're working with limited time and less than ideal circumstances, I still want you to open your mind and open your heart to the opportunity in front of you. If you're running around with little kids and you've got an hour here, hour there, look at that beautiful opportunity that you have to create something meaningful with the time that you do have. So that's got to be part of the equation. We've got to see that opportunity, get excited about that opportunity, and really shift ourselves from focusing begrudgingly on the inconvenience, either the inconvenience of being in quarantine, or the inconvenience of having no time because your kids are so demanding, or the inconvenience of, you name it, having a commute, those less than ideal circumstances. Instead of begrudgingly focusing on what's limiting you, try to flip it, try to reframe it, and see the opportunity. I know this might feel a little bit kumbaya or like, yeah, whatever, Steph, but truly, this step is this early in my 9-step process for a reason, because if you are going into working right now with that lens of negativity and that lens of, heaviness, you have to imagine that your best work isn't going to come out on the other side. So we've got to pause and say, okay, what if this is an opportunity for me? What if I'm here to learn something? What if there's more than meets the eye going on right now? So that was the second one, is see the opportunity. All right, now we're going to get into some brass tacks, because I'm here for that as well. Number 3 is get really cozy with your MVI, also known as minimum viable income. So if you've been hanging out with me online for any amount of time, you know that I'm a huge evangelist of knowing your minimum viable income as an entrepreneur, but I also think all people should know this. That is, what is the minimum that you need to earn to pay your bills right now, feed your family, and not be an absolute stress case. Okay, what is that minimum amount? And now more than ever, you need to know that number, and you need to not freewheel it. So what I mean by that is, I don't want you to just pull a number out of the sky and say, if I could make $12,000 a month, that would be great. No, this is where we need to sit down with pen and paper and your expenses and do that math. And while you're at it, you might as well go ahead and ask if there's anything that you're paying for right now that you are willing to give the boot. Is there anything that you could go without? I have a good friend of mine who just posted on Facebook the other day that, hey, there's no sports right now. I don't need a cable package, you know? Is there anything going on right now that you just can get off your plate? You don't need it right now, and it's one less expense that you have to worry about. So your first order of business for thriving in quarantine or anytime you are working with very limited time and less than ideal circumstances, that first real order of business for you is to make sure that you're meeting this number. Everything else can wait. The first thing you have to do is meet your number. And maybe that sounds obvious, but you would be amazed at how quickly I've talked to so many people who have felt so turned around during this time because there's just so many different things we could be working on. You need to ask yourself the question, does this help me hit my number? And if no, it needs to wait until you've met that minimum for your month. So if you're already hitting it, or you don't need to be earning right now due to how your family is set up, your work right now is to accept that it's enough. So that's really your work in this moment, is to accept that you're doing enough. Maybe you don't need to earn because your spouse's salary is floating your family. And maybe you feel some guilt about that, as a lot of people do. That's something to really think about. That is a true gift. And it's nothing to be ashamed of. It's something to leverage because you get to be choosier in terms of what you want to be working on. So it's truly a gift. It's not something to torture yourself with. Many people in this camp still benefit from setting some kind of financial goal for themselves. Maybe you just start with $2,000, $2,000, something like that. Maybe it's $5,000, whatever it is for you, whatever resonates. I would still advise that you pick something, know where that money is going. If you were to generate $2,000 from your business, what would you do with it? Start to think specifically. Is there extra debt that you could pay off? Is there a car that you could pay off? Is there something you and your family have been saving for, education, etc.? What would you do with that money? Don't just pick a random number and not know where it's going, because then when you receive it, it's going to feel very flat. So the challenge here is to pick that number and then be ready to accept when it's enough. And this is true for all of us, whether you need to be hitting an MVI or you're already supported financially some other way. All of us need to learn what enough is and get okay living with it. This is a huge mistake I've made in the past, and I've shared this before, that you will just get on that financial treadmill of earning more and more and more and more and more. And it's not a good place to be. I can tell you, I've been there. I have generated awesome amounts of revenue for my family or for my business, and then profit for my family. And it never felt like enough. It only feels like enough because I know my personal number for what serves my family, what allows us to live a great life. And when I hit that number, I'm really starting to practice just being happy with it and just sitting with it and just stepping away and saying, cool, we're good. Now I'm going to go enjoy some life. That's really the work here. So once you hit your MVI, or you're on track to hit it, or you simply don't need to worry about MVI right now for whatever reason, you can move on to longer term goals, such as growth, audience growth, which we'll be covering in step 5. All right. So that was step 3, is I need you to get real cozy with that minimum viable income number. Step 4 is get scrappy. So I was going to hit this one, right? If you've been following me, I talk a lot lately about scrappy selling. So I am always a fan of looking for easy, impactful ways to serve others without overcomplicating this. So now more than ever, though, truly, all of us need to get scrappy. No matter how big we are, no matter how much revenue we generate, all of us need to make some sales in the short term to not only hit those minimum viable income goals, but also because we just don't know what's coming down the pipe in terms of when will we get out of quarantine? When will this end? What's the economy going to do? So many unanswered questions. And so getting scrappy needs to be a huge priority for all of us right now. If you attended my Scrappy Selling workshop a couple of weeks back, and if you didn't attend it, you can find it in the podcast. I believe it's episode number 167. You can find it at courageandclarity.com or in your podcast player of choice. So if you were at the workshop, though, you're familiar with my quick, easy, and fun framework. It's my 3-part criteria to help you identify your lowest hanging fruit when it comes to making money. So there's kind of like these 3-pronged approach: quick, easy, fun. That's going to point you towards your best opportunity to do some scrappy selling. So in other words, if your life depended on you getting a customer by the end of today, how would you do it? I challenge every single person reading this or listening to this or watching this to put together a scrappy offer. Seriously, this is a great time to practice getting scrappy. So we might not be able to predict the future or have any idea when our quarantines will be lifted, but we can control the generation of some cash while we also help and serve others. So everybody wins when you get scrappy. Number 5, balance short-term game plan with long-term goals. So we got to balance both the short-term and the long-term all the time, but with a particular lens on it for the moment that we're living in right now. So luckily, we've actually already knocked out the short-term game plan, which is earning your MVI for the month. That's your short-term. That's all it is hit that number, okay? Once you've ticked the box on this month's MVI, and by the way, maybe it'll take you all month and maybe you won't have time to work on your long-term goals. That's okay too. This is really sort of bonus points. Once you hit that MVI, what do you do next? You spend the rest of the month working on your long-term vision. So the question to ask here goes like this: what needs to happen in the longer term to continue to support my ability to hit MVI and beyond, right? So you guessed it, that's growth. I would wager a bet that your long-term goal is probably going to need to be growth related because scrappy selling and hitting your MVI and serving customers, well, we need to be bringing new people into our sphere, right? And so that's where the long-term vision comes in of working on some growth goals. So if you've spent a few weeks working on the money-making revenue side of your business, working towards that MVI goal, you then start to turn your attention to growing. So increasing the number of eyeballs that are seeing what you're creating. So that's the challenge with step 5 is pick a growth goal. For me, I'll share mine with you. I am wanting to double my email list. My email list serves as my home base. You might be reading this right now as a Clarity Chronicle email. Anytime I have opportunities to work with me, it always goes out to my email. So I know that doubling my email list, and I'm not putting a time frame on this because how can we even predict what is time right now in the year 2020? But I know that my goal is I want to double my email list from where I'm at right now. I have my starting point number and I would like to go ahead and double that goal. So after I hit my MVI for the month, which here we are on April 15th, I have hit mine for this month. I'm switching my attention to growth. So that might look like getting on other people's podcasts. That might look like learning Facebook ads. That might look like joint ventures, connections with new people. You get the picture. I'm focusing on that growth side so that I can continue to support hitting my minimum viable income month after month. So no matter how long this pandemic quarantine situation drags on, I have this rinse and repeat process, which is MVI, hit it, get scrappy, go out and find more eyeballs, and repeat and repeat and repeat. So you can see how this would work even outside of coronavirus. Like I said, when we have the luxury of more time and all that good stuff, it's not going to feel so crammed, I suppose, but you can still replicate this. Again, anytime you have less than ideal circumstances, you don't have a lot of time, you got the day job, kids, etc. This is the sort of rinse and repeat that you can practice, which leads perfectly into step 6, which is pick 2 goals. Kind of already talked about this. While working and living in our new upside down reality, I've found it really helpful to choose one revenue goal and one growth goal. So I've already shared the growth goal. Your revenue goal likely correlates with your short-term game plan, right? So for me, mine is $10,000 a month in revenue. If you've listened to the podcast for a while, you know that I have locked in on this number months before our mouths ever uttered the word coronavirus. This is something I got really familiar with and intimate with in 2019 as I was preparing to go out on a 4-month maternity leave. So I'm practiced in this area, but especially now, my ability to hit this goal is my true guidance as I make decisions about what to work on with limited time. So when I only have 2 hours of nap time, or I have to work at night, or I have to get up early in the morning, you better bet that the things I'm working on first correlate directly to my ability to hit that 10K a month number. If I haven't hit that number yet, I try really hard to not work on things that aren't going to directly lead to the generation of that revenue. And that's not selfish. That's not, like I'm single-minded. It's because I know that once my business hits that revenue goal, it's like Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? I can kind of breathe easier. I know that creativity for me doesn't really flow when I'm worried about feeding my family. And so once I know that my number is hit, I am able to breathe a little bit, take a step back, hit the whiteboard, start to think about this business and how I can help people in a free way and how to grow and all that exciting stuff. But I know that I have got to focus on hitting the number and feeling supported financially before any of those great ideas can land with me. So that's really why that revenue goal has got to come first. So like I already shared, next comes that growth goal. This is that goal that you'll work on when you've checked the box on the short-term revenue goal. For me, I told you that it's doubling my email list, and I don't have a hard and fast timeline on that. There are just too many unknowns, and I'm not even really going to try to ballpark a deadline. Instead, I keep it really simple. When I'm not directly working on increasing my revenue, I'm asking myself what kinds of things I could be doing to work towards doubling my list. So pick your 2 goals. That's what I'd love for you to do as a homework assignment out of this podcast episode. Allow yourself to let go of anything that's just not serving one or both of these goals. There's no time or space for extraneous BS in quarantine time. I'd argue anytime, but this is a great time to practice letting go of things that you don't need to be doing. If you've been looking for permission to stop or delegate, this is it. This is it right now. This is your opportunity to just say, you know what? I'm not doing that anymore. And we'll talk a little bit more about that when we get to step 9, which is identifying your non-negotiables. So step 7 is find a daily rhythm. And I love this one. So now that you know what you need to do from a business perspective, it's time to figure out how you will actually do it and when. So when we first entered quarantine, I tried my hand at a daily schedule, like I mentioned at the top of the episode, one of those color-coded homeschool, preschool schedules. I even posted up an hour-by-hour activity plan for my family. And I'm pretty sure that my 3-year-old had scribbled all over it with a marker by day 2. So that tells you about how well that plan went. As we've settled in, I've opted instead for a daily rhythm. So that means favoring a pattern of daily moments and activities versus a rigid schedule. So think pattern, not schedule. If you have kids, especially little kids, I think this is crucial for not losing your marbles completely. Even if you don't, I'd still wager that we can all benefit from a predictable, steady baseline of routine to guide us right now. So helpful to just have that routine, even if you don't have kids. So start to think through what that pattern might look like for you. So I have found the keys to keep it simple. If you're into the idea of Pinterest crafts or baking sourdough bread from scratch, then that is awesome and more power to you. But if you just want to keep it easy and stay sane by setting the bar really low, that's perfectly great too. So here's a peek at the daily rhythm that's working for my family right now. Kids wake up, coffee, breakfast, milk for the baby, possibly a TV show for my preschooler. And this is normally when I like to get my workout in. So while John, my husband, presides over the morning things, I try to go and knock that workout out. That doesn't happen every day, but that's my goal. Once we wrap that up, everyone gets dressed and the baby goes down for his first nap. The preschooler gets her iPad, and this is a 45-minute work sprint. This is my first moment of the day where I'm just getting 45 minutes of really impactful work done. Again, working on that revenue goal first. Once I've hit that, switching over to that growth goal. Baby wakes up, snacks are followed by an easy activity, bubbles, chalk, scooter, walk outside if it's nice, painting our nails, creating art together, letter writing practice, stickers, or maybe even the Starbucks drive-through if it's been too many days in a row without getting to go outside, if the weather's been cold or rainy, etc. So then we have lunch and naps for the kids. This is my main work time. So between 12:30 and 2:30 each day, that's really my only guaranteed time. Then after kids are up, family activities in the afternoon, much like the morning. Usually whatever we didn't do in the morning, we'll do now. So sometimes that might look like a movie or a show. It just depends. Then we have dinner, bedtime routine for the kids, and cleaning up the kitchen. So after that, we have back to work, or I might enjoy a show with John. And that's kind of what our daily rhythm really looks like. So I want you to notice there's not a single timestamp on any of this. I can tell you some recurring patterns, like the fact that my main work time is normally 12:30 to 2:30, and the kids are winding down for bed normally by 7. Like, these are things that tend to happen each day, but we're not timing it out or ushering anybody from one thing to the next. We are going for patterns, not perfection. So think about your daily rhythm. Think about what you need to get done on a daily basis, and then think about what rhythm might really be supportive of that. Number 8 is embrace mediocre. And I love this one. So I know it's kind of weird to hear me tell you to embrace mediocre, but I recently heard Glennon Doyle talk about the mediocre middle, and I resonated so much with that. I was nodding my head to her Facebook Live that she did about it. So let me tell you a little bit about the mediocre middle. In this hilarious and comforting video, I'll have to find the link to in the show notes for Glennon's video that she did about the mediocre middle. She references her time as the owner of an in-home preschool. And during that time, she noticed that the children only seemed to remember the very last thing that they did each day. So no matter how many cool things they did all day, it was only the last thing that really stuck. So for us parents, especially during a time like this, she urges us to adopt a mediocre middle. And it goes like this: start the day strong, maybe some books together, something that fosters connection, and seek to finish the day strong with another bond building activity. But then be okay with the mediocre middle. So does that look like some screen time? Sure. Do you need to fuss around with Pinterest activities and complex crafts? If that doesn't feel good and that feels stressful for you, nope, you don't need to push yourself to do that. So even if you're not a parent, think about how you can translate this. Maybe it's translating it to your clients. Do you need to wow them every second of every day? No, not even close. Will there be some mediocre moments? Probably, although it's probably far more mediocre in your own mind. How often are we our own worst critic, harshest critic, right? So look for the places in your business with your clients where you can really pack a punch. So for me, that's with my coursework, the videos that are released inside my signature program, Crickets to Customers, and the office hours coaching that I do in there as well. That's where I show up really hard. And in my free community, that looks like my podcast episodes, like the one you're absorbing right now, and free workshops, things that I offer. But in between those things, you know, I kind of let it be mediocre. I don't log into social media every day. I don't necessarily post all the time. I just, really try to focus on the most impactful moments that I can be of service. So let go of the idea that you have to be perfect in all of the places all of the time, and instead aim for concentrated quality and give yourself some freaking grace in the in-between moments. That's so important to think through that mediocre middle. That has helped me so much as a parent and with business. So mediocre middle, now more than ever, is so important. Last one, we're going to wrap this thing up, is know your non-negotiables, okay? So each week, protect your non-negotiable tasks that serve the 2 goals that we outlined. If you have time to do more stuff, that's great. If you want to clean out a junk drawer or do laundry, that's fantastic. But if your entire world gets set on fire by the chaos of this season, your non-negotiables are the things that you should have done no matter what. So I like to focus on one growth non-negotiable. For me, it's getting this podcast out, right? Like no matter what happens, come hell or high water, I got to get this done. I've done it at night. I've done it in my bedroom, hiding from my family. This is the thing that I've committed to every week. That's my one growth goal. And then I have one revenue non-negotiable, which is getting to 10K the Scrappy way. That's my revenue goal. So from there, I make a list of all the things that must be done to accomplish these non-negotiables. Here's what it looks like for me. I write the Clarity Chronicle email. This becomes my podcast episode. That's how I outline my podcast. I write the email first. Okay. Then I record the podcast. I always do that on Tuesdays. Other non-negotiables for me are serving my customers because people have invested with me and I care about them and I want to do an amazing job. So that looks like workshops, office hours calls, reading and replying to posts inside my Crickets to Customers community, Voxer support for my one-on-one intensive students. Serving my customers has to be non-negotiable. Then customer or sales related administrative tasks. So if a customer needs something from me on the administrative side or a prospect is emailing me who might buy from me, that's going to get my attention because again, it serves my revenue goal. And then answering any questions that come from my team members that could be holding up their process is also non-negotiable. For example, my wonderful friend Anna, who's going to be editing this podcast and video, if she needs something from me and I'm the bottleneck, well, she can't do her job if I don't get back to her. So that's going to be non-negotiable as well. Then if I have time, honestly, if I feel like it, I may do social media. I may do some extra writing. I may answer non-customer, non-prospect emails, although I got to tell you, lots of times I don't. Lots of times I just don't answer those emails, and that is an option. If they're not from a customer and they're not from one of my audience members who wants to, tell me how great she thinks an episode was, those are emails that I always try to respond to. I certainly always read them, but I do also try to respond. If an email falls outside of that, I may simply just choose to let it go. And that is okay. I know that's a controversial decision, but I'm not an evangelist of inbox zero. I am an evangelist of inbox zero for my customers and my audience members. Those are the people who deserve my attention. Everything else can kind of fall by the wayside when it comes to my inbox. So that's about it, you guys. Those are our 9 steps to thriving, not just surviving in quarantine, but also anytime you've got less time than you wish you did, less than ideal circumstances. These are 9 steps you can use to build a lean, simple, streamlined business that is still highly profitable and gives you the life of your dreams. We don't need to overcomplicate it. We can just focus on 2 goals. 1, that minimum viable income revenue goal, and 1, a growth goal that keeps new people coming into your pipeline. And that can be enough. And frankly, it should be. And if it takes a pandemic to help a lot of us realize this, I would argue that maybe on some level, that it did not all happen for nothing. So I hope this episode has been useful for you. If you happen to be watching this on YouTube, I would love if you commented and let me know if you like this format. This is the first podcast episode I have recorded as a video. It's a new process. It's kind of weird. So if you liked it and you want me to keep doing it this way, please do let me know. But no matter how you've absorbed this episode, thank you for being here. I am honored, truly, to spend some time with you in a time when things really are upside down. I am, again, just honored. And I thank you. Thank you for choosing my podcast and choosing to hang out with me. So until next time, I'm wishing you the courage and the clarity to go after what you love.